What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I am going to go over the escapes. Now the reason why I am going over the skills is mainly due to the fact that they are in summits basically every single week, and we do obviously see them very often, so a lot of players might be wondering how to actually get faster at them, and of course go after like the highest skill possible. Now recently I did go over the slaloms before, and also the lovely buoy smashing as well, which there's not that many of them. I also did notice, by the way, there is going to be a low altitude and also the aerobatic skill here. There is going to be a low altitude fairly close by over here, but do stay tuned for the low altitude video as well. I figured, you know what, I do think going over these skills now is the best way, because we are most likely going to be seeing more of these in the future summits. I mean, the fact that we actually saw a buoy smashing is insane, but it does seem though going after like different part sets and stuff is probably going to be the best way to secure higher scores. Now spawning into the first escape I do want to show, I'm also going to be using the lovely Bugatti, which of course I'm not going to try to pronounce the name of this thing, but a few things I do want to go over though. So yes, on some of the skills like a slalom or even like a bullseye, you are most likely going to want a score breaker set, which of course on the flip side is going to be the best set you can run on them. Funnily enough though, on many of the escapes I would recommend not running any of those sets on them. The reason for that is, if you guys are wondering, by the way, a score breaker is not going to matter whatsoever. So the set you will definitely want to run is going to be a Nitro Chemist set only. And the reason for that though is if you are doing an escape, you're most likely going to want to have the most speed possible. So I would say having a lot of nitros can obviously get you away from the set objective quicker, at least compared to something like a score breaker that is going to be made for other classes, and of course most likely using that on other events like a slalom or even a bullseye. Now spawning back onto the road though, I'm once again going no. Now spawning back onto the road, when you are doing an escape, there is going to be a few things to keep in mind. Number one is probably going to be the car you are running, because some are definitely going to be better than others. Hence why the Bugatti here is probably the number one pick choice. That's probably going to come down to like its handling, but the other thing you're definitely going to want to keep in mind is the traffic in these. Like, not going to lie, guys, I almost feel like in most of the summits the traffic is absolutely ridiculous, and in some ways they're probably going to be worse than the actual like regular skills themselves. Now, one thing I did notice though is many of the escapes in this game, you can do them multiple different ways. So basically every escape in this game is going to give you the option to basically go in any direction of your choice. Now do keep in mind though, if you are doing this, some ways are going to be better than others. Like, for example, the way you might start off, or like which way you actually approach the set escape itself. Like this one right here, which was actually in a summit recently, is going to be the Coconut Resort. When looking at this one, you can clearly see some direction isn't the greatest. Like, if you were to start on this way, guys, and then you basically went here and turned left onto this road, you are most likely not going to get far whatsoever. And then on the flip side of that, though, you're also going to notice how you can pretty much go backwards on the escapes, which might not always be the best way to do them. I did notice, for example, on the Coconut Resort here, you will notice that you can go on the highway a lot faster this direction. And if you are looking the other way, you can go around this way around the highway, but with the circle thing closing, by the time you do get around this turn here, you are most likely going to be a lot slower than the other direction. Now, when starting off on the escape though, you probably did notice that you can easily go off from the main starting point on the escape when you do spawn into it. This is also going to be fairly similar to many of these slalom skills as well. Like, yeah, you can basically go from like the starting point of the skill that way, but you're most likely not going to be as quick because of the initial starting point on them. Now for the hypercars though, these are going to be the best vehicles for a big reason. That is going to be the fact that most of them can hit 300 miles an hour with ease. Now don't get me wrong though, I wouldn't say an Alpha GP vehicle is going to be an awful option on this, but let's be honest though, when starting off here in the exact same place as the Bugatti, you are then going to notice that, yeah, you can hit 260 quick, but that is going to be the fastest you can go. So it's instantly going to make the hypercars a better option on all of them. Like, yeah, the Alpha GP cars can handle well, but if you are looking to get like the highest speed possible in many of the objectives here, I would say the Alpha GP vehicle is probably not the best thing you can run. And that's going to come down to the fact that you're basically redlined on the entire top speed of it. I have no idea what that AI was just doing, my goodness. But you will notice though that I'm probably going to get a similar place with the Alpha GP car though. The issue though is going to be the top end power, so the objective itself is probably going to hit you around the exact same place. And of course overall going around 40 miles an hour slower is going to make a big difference. Now, spawning into a different escape here, I did want to show one that wasn't a summit recently that definitely made a lot of players pretty frustrated, which, trust me, I do understand the traffic in the escapes is probably one of the biggest issues in this game. Like, you're not only going to be battling the car you are in, but you're also going to be battling the AI being in the worst places ever, pretty much going around certain turns where you obviously have to hit them with a certain line. I'm also going to be running the Countach right now, so for example, guys, on the escape right here, you can start off and basically hit it. I would say many players probably know that the best way to do this is to basically go back to almost the end of the said circle in the summit, though, and that way you actually have a decent start on that. So for this summit, I do remember the end being around over here somewhere. Now, I do want to admit, by the way, I would say by now most players probably do know that yes, you obviously do need like a big starting point on the escape to have more of a speed with them, which of course is going to make you start a lot quicker than not actually doing that. Like, if you were to start off and basically do that like you were with like a slalom, you are most likely going to be a lot slower on average doing it that way. But one of the big things I did want to go over in this is most likely going to come down to the traffic itself, and that is probably going to be like the biggest factor ever in the escapes. Like, yes, you obviously do want to get better at driving and of course, you know, getting around the turns quicker. Now, I do want to run this escape one more time, basically being in the regular game itself and not in the summit. This was, of course, when this escape was available around 2 weeks ago when it was out. Now, keep in mind, though, guys, one thing I find kind of insane is, yes, you obviously want, like, a head start with the escapes, but the biggest unfortunate thing about this is going to come down to the traffic RNG itself, and I would say that's probably going to be the biggest problem with the escapes right now. I also do want to know in the comments below, would you guys like to see a traffic nerf in the escapes themselves? I would almost say around 95% of the player base most likely wants some type of traffic nerf in the summits itself. That way many of the escapes are not going to be an absolute nightmare. And one thing I did notice, by the way, is going to be the players themselves getting in the way or like sitting in the middle of the road in certain places. That way you hit them. Now, for the main tips I can give you, though, if you guys are looking to get a higher score in these escapes, number one is by far going to be the car you do pick. I would almost say most players probably have like a set vehicle for the escapes, but unfortunately the number one vehicle right now is going to be the hypercar with them. At least compared to like the Crew 2 before, you could run like an Alpha GP or like even a Tier 2 vehicle, even like a Rally Raid in one of them, which I would say like an off-road escape, you most likely want to use an off-road vehicle. Even back in the Crew 2, though, you also had to drive a hypercar down a mountain, so it is most likely going to be a similar issue there. Now for this, though, the biggest thing, though, is most likely getting the right starting point on the escape itself, so that way you can actually turn around or even go past and go back that direction. Just make sure you guys are getting a big, like, starting point on the escape, that way you have more speed when hitting it, and of course it's going to get you away from the objective a lot quicker that way. And of course, the biggest elephant in the room is going to come down to the traffic itself. In some ways, I hate to say this, I almost feel like it's going to be based on RNG. Like, yeah, you can be an insanely good driver, but if you do have a lot of traffic on that said run you are doing, you're basically going to have a nightmare of a run, and you are most likely not going to get the highest score you can. But let's see what they actually do with the traffic in the future. Maybe they might end up changing it, but who honestly knows? Again, guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments below, and if you have any questions regarding the escapes, definitely let me know.